Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Seven Figures or Bust podcast, episode 36, my friends. I am Christian Brindle. He's Glen Shelton. We're your hosts of this show. And by the way, this is the #1 podcast in the world, if you didn't know, for growing your insurance business. Glen, we got a jam-packed show for the people today.
We do. Do you want to hear? I had a dream about you last night, and I wanted to tell you live. I wanted to tell you live. I wanted to tell you it's the craziest. It doesn't fit into any of what we're talking about today, but I thought this would be a funny way to start the show today. So yes. I'm supposed to meet you at the airport, okay? And for whatever reason, you've left Violet in my care, okay? So I have Violet. I have to get myself and Violet to the airport to meet you in my dream. I'm in the car with Violet. I've got my suitcase in the back. For whatever reason, I get out of the car and I am now on a tractor, okay? I am now driving a tractor to the airport to meet you. I've got people asking if, flagging me down. You're calling me. You're like, where are you? I'm considering cutting people's grass on the way because I've got the tractor. I get to the airport and then I realize I don't have Violet. I'm freaking out. I look at the clock. I'm 40 minutes till the flight. There's no way I can get Violet, get back to the airport. I took a tractor here. I drove 20 miles an hour on the way to the airport.
Wow.
And then I wake up and you were just disappointed in me. So that was my dream last night. It was wild.
Well, in dream and in real life, no, I'm just kidding. You left your goddaughter. Goddaughter. How could you do such a thing?
But
that's hilarious.
For a tractor ride? Are you kidding me? I mean, come on. I felt amazing on that thing,
Felt like it was you against the world,
It was. Farmer Glen, guys. That's the future. The future is in farming.
Topics for today's show.
I've completely derailed this whole episode.
We're going to be talking a lot of compliance today and a lot of regulations. Both of our favorite topics, by the way, if you didn't already know.
Yes.
And the first topic we're going to be kind of talking about, we talked about it kind of in a stream in the past, but we're going to kind of go a little more into depth on this stream today, which is the new CMS proposed rule that just was dropped in maybe about 3-4 weeks ago. And then we're also going to be talking about the FCC rules later on in the show. So new CMS proposed rule. So I'll provide a tiny bit of backstory to this, right?
Yeah.
All of us probably know, if you're a Medicare agent, I'm assuming, about all the rules and regulations that transpired and kind of trickled down and domino effects of, government tampering, if you will, in our space, from the Inflation Reduction Act to
tampering,
to final rule, right? To all of these different things that just made 2024 just an absolute roller coaster, right? Election happens. There's going to be a new CMS commissioner or administrator coming in on inauguration day.
Say his name.
Say my name. You're Dr.
Mehmet Oz.
You're Heisenberg. You're goddamn right. Mehmet Oz.
I'm the danger, Skylar.
What the hell's the matter with you? We're a family. Okay, sorry, guys.
With compliance talk at this level, we're gonna have to try to break it up to keep this engaging. So stay with us. Stay with us. We're gonna get through this.
So CMS, right? The current leadership puts out a proposal, which shocked me when it happened, because I'm like, you guys are gonna be freaking gone in a month, and you're trying to crowbar in one last middle finger to us on the way out. And in my opinion, this proposal is more radical and more crazy than any of the ones we've gotten previously. Now, typically with proposals, even if it were to pass, which I think it's it might be 50-50, right? Because new leadership comes in. A lot of times it does take them some time to, overhaul kind of what's going on. But, when those proposals come out, they always look ridiculously crazy. And then the final rule ends up being like maybe a toned down version of the crazy. It's still crazy, but it's not as crazy of the proposal, right? So
is that, by the way, let me ask you something. Is that what you believe is going on too? Because we're seeing some of these headlines with Biden essentially doing some of the same things, right? I just saw a headline last week where supposedly Biden took a bunch of ocean area right off the coast. I can't remember where it was, East Coast, Gulf of America, as it shall be renamed. But supposedly he made it where you can't drill oil anymore. Permanent ban on oil drilling. So we are seeing at the presidential level some attempted blocking of, let's get some last minute rules in. Is that what you think is going on at the administrator level for CMS? Or attempting to happen?
It certainly feels that way, right?
Yeah.
Like, because the leadership now that's there, I mean, you're not going to be there, right? Even if this rule does pass, you're not going to be around to be involved in it whatsoever. And again, like I said, this proposal, in my opinion, is very radical. And I think it'll impact a lot of agents. So, but I know we've talked about this before, but like, what was your reaction on what the proposal was stating when you heard about it, right? With the lead generation and everything like that. What was your reaction?
So you're talking about CMS final rule, the first?
No, the proposal that just came out.
The most recent one.
Yes.
It's okay. So here's what's tough is I've been a part of this cycle for years now. I think, you and I both have on different ends of it. And the interesting part is it's kind of intersected. And that's the interesting part about these two topics today is talking about CMS final rule, talking about the FCC. It's actually more intertwined than you guys can realize. And originally, because I feel like this kind of all starts if you go back to the previous final rule, and maybe it's even before that, where they originally tried to regulate the marketing side of it. And Essentially the FCC stepped in and was like, no, like that's what we do. Like we regulate the communications aspect across all different markets here in the United States, not just Medicare, so we'll handle those regulations. You guys stick to Medicare. But we've also seen, regardless of the FCC essentially doing that, we're still seeing CMS try to get involved on the marketing side, which again, technically, based on previous conversations that I've had, that we've had, my understanding is that CMS, when it comes to communication to a Medicare beneficiary, technically has the final say. So that's where this can get really murky, you guys, as the FCC can create rules, the CMS can create rules. They can be a little different, have different nuances, not exactly the same flavor. And technically CMS will have final say, but again, when it's not lining up, it can be really confusing.
Sure.
Now, in regards to your question here, what did I think about this most recent proposal? It's tough because on one hand, the same feeling that I think you have is like, this is so crazy. And with the new administration coming in, is there really any teeth to this? But then I have to have a reservation. Like I have to really kind of be concerned to some level because, again, based on historically, we've seen this time and time again now for the past several cycles with CMS. Is they propose something crazy, and then a lot of agents and the chatter becomes, "Oh, this will never pass. Oh, this is silly."
And then it does.
But then it does, and so it's tough because on one hand, I do feel like this is probably just a shot in the dark, the last gasping breath of this current administration. But then on the flip side, I'm like, let's look at what's happened historically. Maybe there is some teeth to this.
Just to provide some context for anybody that hasn't gone through the proposal or seen any of the the videos that I've done, or videos we've done together about this. The proposal goes through a lot of different things, but to me, I think the most relevant piece of it, and the thing that we should be paying the most attention to, is changes the definition of communication, right? So for those of you that don't know, any outreach or contact with a Medicare beneficiary is identified and defined as either marketing or communication currently by CMS. Marketing, long story short, is if you're mentioning any specific plan benefits, any carriers by name, any specific plans. Like if you're getting real specific, it's a marketing piece, and there's a lot more regulation that defines that, right? That you typically need CMS approvals. You typically need SMID codes, right? You need and there's certain things you can say, certain things you can't say, right? A majority of people that are doing marketing outreach are doing it non-compliantly. I see it all the time on ads and everything like that.
Yes.
But that's still the rules. And if you get busted, you busted, right? It depends on who busts you, I suppose. Nothing's against the rule unless you get caught, right? Whereas communication is defined as educational outreach, right? So you're not mentioning plan-specific benefits. You're not mentioning specific carriers. You're keeping it extremely educational. You're saying, hey, everyone, I'm your local Medicare specialist. My name's Christian. I can help you with your plan. Call me today. That's educational, right? They want to change the definition to where everything is marketing, basically, and everything has to get approval from CMS, all the way down to a video you make on YouTube explaining the difference between MedSup and Medicare Advantage. Now, for anyone that's gone through the process of getting CMS approval on something, you can go through carriers and do it. Sure, that makes it a little bit easier, but it's not fun. And for someone like if you let's say you have a YouTube channel and you make weekly videos, imagine having to get every video approved.
No way. No way.
At every Facebook ad that's communication, right? Like the majority of marketing that we do now as an agency is communication.
Correct.
Because we don't want to deal with the bullshit. And frankly, I like it that way too. It keeps our nose clean. We can really just kind of be creative and just kind of put things out that we feel like are going to be beneficial, but we're not towing the line either. We don't put out marketing stuff like that without prior approvals and things like that. But yeah, I mean,
here's the scariest part about this rule passing, in my opinion, is that I know firsthand from the relationships that I have that the infrastructure at CMS does not exist to handle that type of approval process. If they genuinely were to come out and pass this year and say that all communications, marketing, sales, whatever, all of it has to go through CMS, it's not just marketing now, it's all communication, and they have to approve everything, that would be the equivalent of trying to shove an elephant down your toilet. It will not fit. Nothing, maybe the trunk will make it down that first pipeline a little bit, but there would be so many people and so many companies. I mean, again, looking at it from all these different levels, right? You have the IMOs, the FMOs, the call centers, the agencies, the agents, all the way down to the independent agent who would potentially need to get their communications cleared through CMS. They would have to scale up in a way that would be unbelievable over a very small amount of time. And I don't see that happening. So this would be a disaster for everyone. If something like this were to pass, I would be shocked. I don't know. I would be shocked if something like this were to actually pass as it's currently written.
It's so stupid for everyone involved, right? Like, and why? Right? Like, what is actual, like, people that are actually following communication, guidelines that put out communication outreach to beneficiaries, who is it hurting? Right? Like, I think if you talk to someone at CMS, they'd probably say the argument is, well, there's a lot of people that are, doing marketing outreach, but they're not saying, but they're not getting it approved. So enforce your existing rules.
Yeah.
Why don't you do that instead of keep making new rules that aren't going to be enforced anyway?
100%. 100%.
It's such a dumb thing. And it's dumb for them too. It creates way more work for them with a problem that's not there, right? Like the problem is not communication outreach, right? The problem is that people are doing marketing outreach and not getting it approved, have nothing to do with each other.
Correct.
And so it's just such a fascinating to kind of get in. I'd love to kind of be a bug on the wall on their meetings, or be involved in their meetings so I can tell them what assholes they are. If anyone of you're watching can get me into the board meetings, please do. It would do us all a lot of good. I'm a mandatory permanent fixture in every meeting they have, and I would just yell at them for an hour.
The one thing
all
that
their
came
dumb
up,
ideas.
Yeah, the one thing that came up with the last final rule that I really truly believe now more than ever was this reoccurring theme that they don't understand our business, right? They genuinely don't understand how the insurance business works. When they were trying to regulate the FMO, right, and they're trying to say, well, you can do this, but you can't do this, or you can only help an agent out this much, but you can't help them out this much. It was so convoluted. It's like, do you understand how the value proposition of being an upline, being a field marketing office works? Like an independent marketing organization works. It doesn't make any sense based on the rules they were trying to create. So I wish there was representation, maybe not Christian screaming, but maybe an actual agent. If there was an actual agent who could be there to help them create real policy. Like, I'm all for rules where it makes sense. I'm all for regulation where it makes sense. But the flip side of it is just like blind. It just feels like they're just like blind firing, just like hoping they're going to hit a target. I don't get it.
I had several conversations last year when this whole final rule debacle was going down with people that would know. And repeatedly what I heard was CMS doesn't really know what an FMO is. They don't get it. They don't understand what the FMO does. I'm like, how is that possible? How are you in charge of regulating something and you're clueless in what it is? Like, that shouldn't be allowed. It's kind of like that conversation we had the other day on the show about billing providers not knowing anything about insurance.
Yep.
It's naivete is probably the biggest plague that hits our industry, my friends, in a multitude of different ways. Before we kind of pivot into the FCC topic, because I know we want to spend plenty of time on that.
Yeah.
Glenn, talk to us about this show's sponsor.
Yes. Today's sponsor, you guys, is Lead Heroes, your number one insurance lead provider for senior insurance leads. At Lead Heroes, when it comes to compliance, we have been doing this work for so long, and we are ahead of the curve. Part of what you do not have to worry about with Lead Heroes is whether your marketing is compliant or not. We stand behind our services, including offering 100% legal indemnification for all of our clients. And what that means is you don't have to think about any legal risk. We are assuming all of that legal risk by transacting business with you as an agent or as an agency. So this fits in very well with today's show and today's topic. Again, that's leadheroes.com, leadheroes.com. If you need help with turning 65, Medicare supplement, final expense, or you just want to hire someone to make calls on your behalf, head over to leadheroes.com and we would love to help you get rolling.
One last thing I want to mention before we go into the main segment is, in case you guys didn't see, by the way, we dropped my 10 video course yesterday on buying books of businesses. So in 2024, I've posted this several times in the group now, our agency acquired through acquisition around 900 new clients. Over the years, we've purchased thousands of clients as an agency, and it's helped us grow exponentially, right? Imagine how long it takes you to write 900 clients. For most of you, probably a decade.
Yeah.
You know, some of you will never write 900 clients. Sorry. And we did it in one transaction, right? Or not one, I mean, but a handful of different transactions,
right.
Maybe 3 in 2024. And it helps us grow our business exponentially. This training, we're only charging $197 for it one time for lifetime access. It's not included into the 7-Figure Medicare University. It's kind of its own thing. I've seen a couple people ask about that. Search the group for it. It's all over the group. Definitely check it out. I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. And, you know, who knows? I mean, you don't need to buy 900 clients at once. That might not be the appetite that you have, but maybe you can buy an extra 30, 40, 50, someone that wants to get out of the business. And it can help you grow your business by leaps and bounds. If you're at 100 apps a year, let's say, and you can buy 50 more through acquisition, you just added an extra 50% to your yearly growth. So check it out.
Did you see, while we're on the topic, did you see one of the comments where someone mentioned they grossly overpaid for the book of business they acquired? Man, that broke my heart reading that comment, because that's like step one. Step one in the whole process is making sure that you are paying a fair market rate and that it makes sense for you and your business, which again, Christian covers all of these details in the course. So definitely check it out if you have any interest in buying a book of business, big or small. Super relevant going into 2025.
100%. And you know, overpaying is a common mistake. It's a mistake that I've made over the years in the past for certain books of businesses. And, you know, I take all of my experience on doing this for years and cram it into 10 videos for it. So you don't have to go through those pain points. You don't have to go through a situation where you get a bad deal, you get ripped off, you know, you overpay. You can know exactly what to look for, exactly how to value it, exactly what to prioritize, and exactly how to protect yourself throughout the entire transaction. So all through things we've done correctly and things we've done incorrectly to learn along the way. So let's shift gears to the FCC. Glenn.
Yes.
Talk to us. What is this FCC rule that seems to have been kind of forgotten about? It's being talked about a little bit, but I don't hear it talked about too much, and it's going into effect in what, 3 weeks? 2.5 weeks?
Yeah, a couple weeks here, guys. So I feel like, and I was thinking about this topic since we were discussing it, talking about it on the show yesterday. I think the best way to understand this, especially from the Medicare point of view, is to kind of roll back the clock here, to go back. I want to say it's 2022. So I believe it was CMS in 2022 that proposed this rule of 1-to-1 consent, where the Medicare beneficiary has to only talk to the entity that they opted in to talk to, which in theory, and again, this kind of goes back to what we just talked to, is like, in theory, it sounds great on paper, but then it gets really convoluted when you're talking about an FMO generating marketing, which a lot of, field marketing office, right? It's kind of like the core concept of an IMO FMO is to assist downline agents, independent agents, agencies with their marketing, right? And they made it very clear in this proposal that the 1-to-1 consent would not cover even wholly owned subsidiaries. And there was this initial panic. But again, at the time, the chatter in early 2022 was it 23 or 22 that initial proposal happened? I'm aging myself here because the years are flying.
It might be 23, because if I remember right, when they came out with the actual final rule, I think they came out and said, we're not doing this now, but we will revisit it later. Do you remember that
Yes.
verbiage?
So maybe this was proposed in 23, and then that verbiage came out early 2024 is what it was, right?
I believe that is the case.
I might be mixing up the years a little bit here, and I apologize, but the information is the same, regardless of whether it's 2023.
No, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I'm not exactly. But regardless, the proposal comes out. The word on the street is that there's no way this can pass, that it's too radical. It would destroy FMOs, IMOs, not to mention, marketing companies, but even more so just that agent model of getting assistance with marketing, which the vast majority of agents out there, you guys, they're not capable of paying for their own marketing. They don't understand how to market for themselves. The FMO and IMO model has been around so long and works so well because the marketing company, the IMO, FMO, they understand how to market to the beneficiaries. And so it becomes this win-win situation where they can either do it or subsidize the cost even for the agent or agency. And then the agent or agency is getting more affordable access to leads and marketing, and they're able to write more business, which helps the IMO and FMO grow. It's when it's done right, it works really well. I mean, how many IMOs and FMOs have you guys seen grow in a big way because of this model? So now I'm sitting at a table with a massive organization. I'm not going to say who, but one of the biggest organizations you can imagine. I'm sitting at the table later that year after that was proposed. And what I'm told sitting at the table is that there is a battle going on between the FCC and CMS silently behind the scenes. And that essentially the FCC stepped in when CMS made this type of radical proposal. And the FCC is like, whoa, 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 whoa. We would love to implement a rule like this. We actually have been talking about implementing a rule like this for a while, but you guys don't have jurisdiction to implement this rule. This is, Federal Communications Commission. Like, this is us. We handle communications here in the United States. So that led to what Christian just said. He took the thunder away from me, but we'll allow it.
I'm sorry.
That's when the final rule does come out, and they say, hey, we're not going to do this now, but we might do it in the future. And then the FCC, several months, 4 or 5 months after that, they come out and they say, hey, we're going to implement this new one-to-one consent rule, where when someone opts in, and they opt in online, however you get that permission to contact, it has to be the entity that they opted in to speak with is the entity that's contacting them. Now, at the time, a lot of people viewed this after the FCC proposed it. It's like October 2023 gets proposed, or in November. It was like right before Thanksgiving. Very, very shady little secret vote. They get it on the ballot. They vote on it December 23. Goes into effect January 2024. They say you have a 6 months grace period. There's this huge outrage at the FCC for how quickly they're trying to get all these people to change how they're marketing. So then they change it to a 12-month grace period. So, they get it, they vote on it December 23. It goes into law January 2024. They say, okay, you have 12 months to change to this one-to-one consent. Now, the CMS essentially just piggybacks on this rule with their next rule change. And they basically say, hey, we're adopting the new FCC rules. It needs to be a one-to-one consent. So again, whoever opts in, that's who's contacting them. That's how the one-to-one consent works. Now, in theory, this sounds great, but this creates a very murky situation for a lot of these really big organizations, ourselves included, right? Mm-hmm. Lead Heroes is a marketing company. We've been doing this for years. How can we still help agents with their marketing while still complying with these rules? Because, I can't go out and start hiring all these agents, be like, hey, if you want this lead, well, I guess you have to move your contracts or I have to put you on my payroll or something, right? Like, how can this work? Well, it turns out there is a quote unquote loophole in the rules here where you can get reconsent. So as long as the entity, you stick to that same rule, the entity that gets the original permission to contact is the one that's actually reaching out to them and speaking to them, that entity can then get new set of permission from that person, from that prospect, and say, hey, Mrs. Jones, this is Glenn. I've got Agent Christian on the phone here. Is it okay if you'd be able to speak with him about your Medicare options? Okay, yeah, I'll speak to Christian. Okay, great. Let me get you over to Christian. Now that one-to-one consent has essentially been transferred from us to the agent, and we can continue to help agents and agencies all over the US. So I was really excited that there was a solution, in my opinion, that's pretty easy as a workaround. But for a lot of agents and agencies, this is still going to be a huge pain point, right? There's a lot of agents and agencies who've been marketing using shared leads, shared data, people who opted in for any number of things, and they're trying to figure out what to do next. So, I think there's been somewhat of a scramble behind the scenes. The other thing, though, like you mentioned, is I think a lot of people just aren't even talking about it.
Yeah, but I'm not hearing the chatter like I was, and that's interesting to me because it's closing in on taking effect. I've only seen a couple of people talk about it in very small quantities.
Yes. Yeah. So I foresee this is most likely going to be a consolidation. I think what you'll see is probably fewer entities doing this type of marketing, and they'll probably become bigger because of it.
So to walk the audience through kind of the process, right? So like the way at Lead Heroes, we're going to be able to kind of adjust, right? And make sure that we'll be able to provide FCC compliant leads. This episode of the 7 Figures or Bust podcast is brought to you by the 7 Figure Medicare Agent Summit. Guys, it is a fact that getting around other people that are chasing the same ambitions and destinations in their business as you is a great thing, and it can propel your business years ahead than not getting around people and networking and going to live events. The 7 Figure Medicare Agent Summit is the premier event. Every year we hear year after year after year that it is the event that has the best content. So many events nowadays, they do a lot of pitching from the stage. They're really just there to sell you things. And if nothing more than that, they're just a bunch of vendors put together and they're just nothing but networking. There's no content. The summit is the best of both worlds, you guys. The summit puts together great, fantastic speakers from all ends of the industry, and also get you in a room with like-minded individuals from all over the country that are trying to build their business just like you. The summit this year is taking place in Salt Lake City from June 22nd to 24th at the Hilton Hotel. We still have tickets available. We'd love to have you come out for the event. We are over 50% sold out at the time of recording this, but get your ticket now while you can. This event will sell out, and we'd love to see you there in Salt Lake City. We generate, let's say, a 1-to-1 consent opt-in, right, for us Lead Heroes to call them.
Right.
We call them, and then verbally over the phone, we get a re-consent, right, with the caller who gets 1-to-1 consent for the specific agent by name who's going to be reaching out to them. And so it's 1-to-1 consent for us to call them in the first place when they opt in, and then the 1-to-1 consent for the agent is acquired over the phone and that reconsent. Do I have that correct, Lead Daddy?
You have that correct, sir. Yes, that's exactly how it works. So, and again, this also, when you look at it, this holds up with the spirit of the law too, right? The intent of this rule to begin with the FCC was to cut down on all this spammy bullshit we were all getting, right? I go opt in for a home loan, and now I'm getting spam calls for everything you could imagine, car warranties.
For years.
I mean, signing up for any type of service, water filters, all sorts of spammy stuff that you're getting. And technically it was legitimate because I had opted in somewhere, and then my information got shared with all sorts of people. So the intent of this rule by the FCC is to try to cut down on that and make it so Mrs. Jones knows exactly who's contacting her. And that's the beauty of this, is we're able to really help keep a clear path of communication to the prospect. And ultimately, you guys, I think this should help increase sales overall. I think what you're going to see is a slightly higher intent lead because of that 1-to-1 consent. So now the downside, though, is the cost of marketing will most likely continue to escalate as we go down this path. It's going to be a very interesting year as all of us continue to figure this out.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And I think that's, I think there's pros and cons anytime you see something like this, right? And I think that makes perfect sense, that the pros are you have a little bit better intent with said lead, right? The lead is expecting a call from Glenn or Christian or whoever, right? So they know the name ahead of time. They're expecting a call from that person. So that increases the intent. How many times have you guys gotten a lead of some kind, whether it be direct mail, a Facebook lead, any type of lead, even telemarketed lead, and you call up and they're like, who? What?
Yeah.
I did what? I still think you'll get that to a certain extent. I think you always will with leads.
Yeah.
But it probably will reduce that a bit because they opted in to talk to you specifically. And there's documentation of that. But that is more expensive to generate. All around. So that makes perfect sense that the cost would rise as a result.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate truth. And when this rule first got passed, I was on a panel with a few people in the industry. Shout out to Jeff Root. If you guys know who Jeff is, he's been in the final expense marketing space for years. And this was something that was speculated when this first came to be almost a year ago, that what we'd most likely see is probably higher intent, but higher cost. So, what's interesting, and I saw someone share this the other day, is what you really need to be focusing on is CPA and not CPL. CPL is going to become more relevant than it ever has. I could charge you $100 or I could charge you $5 for a lead, but none of that matters in your CPA cost. And if you don't know what I'm saying in these terms, CPL is cost per lead, CPA is cost per acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
So who cares how much the lead cost is? You need to be laser focused on your CPA, your cost per acquisition. Mm-hmm. And that's the number that matters. Your how much is that client worth to you, the lifetime client value, and then how much did you spend to acquire that client? Those are the two stats, you guys. We get lost on the marketing side, I think, with all these different KPIs. What should I track? What metrics should I follow? It's how much did you spend to acquire that client, and what is that client truly worth to you?
Yeah. Yep. What's the lifetime value of the client, and what is your cost to acquire that client? And most of the time, like even when you're dealing with CPAs that are, let's say 300, 400. I mean, we had a conversation, I feel like pretty recently, about an organization that was like 700 to 900, if I remember right, on their CPA. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And
yes.
But like, let's say, for like an agency, most agencies, let's say your CPA is higher and it's 300 to 400. People are always like, when I talk about this, they're like, well, my cost per acquisition in that situation is higher than what I make in my first year commission, because the big boys don't play the game of first year commission. You're the only one playing the game of first year commission. The big boys play the game of lifetime value of said clients. So to kind of give an example on that, right? Let's say your average yearly annual commission on a Medicare client is $300. It's probably a bit more than that at this point, but let's just use a round number, right? And how long do you expect to keep a client on average on the books? Some people will be like 10 years, 15 years, but like you lose some people, right? So you got to count it into it. Let's say it was 5 years. Let's say you're being conservative. I think that is rather conservative. Then you're looking at a $1,500 lifetime value of the client. So the metrics work out like this. You have a $300 cost per acquisition to bring in $1,500 of revenue for your business. And that's a no-brainer.
Yes.
If you're planning on being in business long enough to acquire the lifetime value of the client. I understand that when new agents come in, they don't have they don't have the ability to kind of to look that far ahead and see the forest for the trees. But as you grow, those are metrics you definitely have to take into consideration, and that's how larger agencies look at their metrics in terms of scale.
Correct. Yeah. And it can be jarring when you hear those numbers, like, wow, someone's willing to spend $700, $800, $900 to acquire a client and lose money essentially on that client for 2 or 3 years, but they're banking on that retention, which will drive that profit year 3, 4, or 5. But yeah, that's the game that a lot of the big boys are playing, is they understand the long-term value. Also, Russell Brunson, as a shout out to the founder of ClickFunnels, he has this quote: "And the most on CPA is the winner." And I really do believe that. When I hear about somebody willing to spend that much money to acquire a client, it's like, man, I'm sure they can essentially get as many as they want. If they're willing to spend that much, I'm sure they can just come in and buy as many clients up as they want, essentially.
There was a good question in one of the streams on one of the platforms of the pod, and I'll read it to you and kind of get your take on it. Thought it was a good question. So I'm hearing two things about one-to-one consents. One is you create your own lead and no resale. Again, I think we've already kind of answered that question. The other is that you can only dial one-to-one and you cannot use predictive dialers anymore. Which one is true, or are both true?
So the one-to-one consent, by definition, that's correct. Technically, there is no resale. So the whole lead sharing, aged lead market, that is a dead market now. There is no more. It's over. So, the legal way that we're able to continue to help agents is through that verbal reconsent process, where we've got a recording of the call that we're giving to you, where you will hear that prospect agree to that new permission to contact that we're gaining over the phone. That's how we're able. It's not a shared lead. It's a really getting that reconsent verbal. So yes, shared leads is dead. Aged leads is dead. If you are working with a different entity, they have to get a new permission to contact before that person gets handed off to you. And it needs to have your name or your agency name verbally consented or written consented through writing, one or the other. The other comment, I think that to me just sounds like pure confusion, because yes, with predictive dialers, with dialing systems, you can do, one line calling out at a time, 2 lines calling, 3 lines calling out at a time. That is something completely different. That's not true at all. That those rules haven't changed. There are some TCPA rules around when you're using a predictive dialing platform like that, on what your fall off is, and essentially they just want to make sure you're not spamming too fast with too many calls. But there's been no rule changes that I'm aware of where you have to do one-to-one dialing. I think that's just some pure confusion that probably happened based on all the terminology that's been floating around.
Right.
That's
a
good question though.
Yeah. I have a question for you related to this that I think is a super interesting conversation that I think the audience will be fascinated by. So when I started in the space, and when you started in the space, I feel like there were a lot more lead companies than there are today. Maybe that's not true. What do you think?
No, I 100% believe that to be true.
So that being said, right, there's less lead companies today than there were when maybe you and I both got started a decade ago plus. A lot of lead companies I know of have just disappeared, died off. Maybe they got acquired by a larger entity and they exclusively just do marketing for that entity, that kind of thing, right? Like they don't publicly share or do leads for the public. What do you for the smaller percentage of lead companies that exist today? What does this do to the majority of them? You kind of already touched on it a little bit, but like, are we in a place where the vast majority of lead companies just die and there's only a couple left?
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned that I think consolidation is the future, and most likely that's what we'll continue to see. Obviously at Lead Heroes, you guys, as someone who, this is officially year 10, I've been probably, you've heard me probably say a decade or 10 years for the last year now. I was technically rounding up. Technically this year is 10 years. So being in the space for 10 years and seeing a lot of people come and go, seeing a lot of the rule changes, seeing some of these acquisitions and other lead companies going out of business, I think the potential from what we're seeing on CMS and the FCC is I think what we'll see is a streamline based on the compliance. So I think just like we've seen with some of these big names like Integrity, AmeriLife, we've seen a lot of streamlining through acquisitions. I think we'll probably see a lot of the same thing on the marketing side, where you'll see this really simple, clean A to B of, hey, we're generating all these opt-ins this way. We're reconsenting all these opt-ins this way. We're sending it to these agents and agencies. Vertical integration is usually the way you can really win in capitalism, in my opinion, right? Controlling the entire process from start to finish. If you're controlling it all the way, from the point that Medicare beneficiary opts in to how it gets reconsented to the agent to the carrier, right? And you have the ability to control that whole process top to bottom. I think that's ultimately the future of what we'll see in the insurance market. And that's probably for better or for worse, right? Obviously, I love the free market. I wish there were more options for agents, but the reality is based on the cost, the compliance, and the ability to navigate this space, you'll probably end up seeing fewer and fewer options available, which is a lot of times going to be a disservice to the little guy, the independent agents out there. Mm-hmm. When I first got in the space, there was tons of options.
Yeah.
I was just one of many. And now it seems like I feel like there's fewer and fewer and fewer options for sure.
The ones I remember are NetQuote.
Oh, yeah.
And Precise Leads. Quote Wizard. NetQuote, Quote Wizard, Precise Leads, Benepath Leads.
All web leads. I think they got
all web leads.
They either changed their name, got bought, or got in trouble. Something happened with them. All web leads. It seemed like they were a dime a dozen. There were all of these different aggregators and generators, 10 years ago that, one way or another, they've either closed shop or gotten acquired or, just kind of disappeared.
And I bought from all of those guys that we mentioned, like at least once. Some of them I would be so just disgruntled with my experience. I still make sales. I made sales with anything. But like I'd be disgruntled about something they did. Yeah. And I'd still go back like a year later and buy more because I forgot. I'd like forget why I was upset. I'd be like, what was I upset about? Be like, oh, here's another $1,000. I need some leads.
Yeah. Oh, man.
And, I mean, back then, that was before I learned how to really market myself. It was cold calling back then and the occasional buying of some of these leads. And most of the time they were shared leads, right? Like, a lot of you guys really struggle with exclusive leads, but these were leads that were literally sold to like 10, 15 agents every time.
At a minimum 10 or 15. Yeah. If not 100 agents got that same lead.
I remember buying these NetQuote leads and I don't remember what they cost, but I think like they went on sale one time. They were like $5 a lead.
Yeah. $5, $10.
I like emptied my bank account. I was like, here. And I knew the game was the second the lead came in, I had to call. Because if I didn't, they would have like 20 other calls because they were in real time. When I was getting it, it was also going to like 19 other agents. I'm like, all right, I got to beat 19 other agents. That was kind of my mentality.
Yeah.
And we would make sales with those leads. It just blows my mind today how many people just. I don't want to use the word they struggle because if someone struggles, like I feel for you, right? But they just don't even try with it, like an exclusive lead. It's only going to you. I don't know if you guys realize that 10 years ago, that was like a rare commodity.
Right. It was. I keep thinking my brother-in-law worked for bankers. For a short time, and I just remember him coming home one day, and I go over to his house, and he just had a stack of these leads, all these companies that we were just naming, and they all looked the same too. They all, and I think a lot of them were probably just selling to each other too. It's probably just this big shell game, honestly.
Yeah.
But I mean, and it was just like the most generic looking lead you could imagine. It's basically like a name and a phone number on a computer printout.
Pretty much. Yeah.
That's
what a lot of these look like.
Yeah. There was like no information. And before this, you guys, for the real old timers, people who've been in the space for a long time, there was this golden era of these internet lead companies that predates when it got really bad and they were all sharing, I think, and it was just like an aggregator shell game. It was like 2007 to like 2010. I know a lot of big time agencies, med sub agencies, where they didn't pay much and they made a ton of sales and they just grew a big agency. But that was like, I feel like it's been all downhill since probably about 2010. It's just like we're bobsledding downhill from 2010. But yeah, it's funny to think about because those leads, I know exactly what you're talking about. I saw those leads firsthand. I worked some of those leads myself firsthand as an agent, and just seemed like it felt like there was no quality to them. It just felt like it was as thin as that paper it was printed on, you know.
When I would pick up those leads to call, I would go into it with the mentality that I was going to war. I was ready to do battle. You know what I mean? I was like, pick up the phone. I'm like, I'm like ready, like ready to do battle with the leads.
Yeah.
But, that just speaks to sales ability, right? Like,
oh, for sure.
Because even then, right? Like I was coming off of making cold calls and getting new clients that way. There's nothing more difficult. That and door knocking. I think I put them in the same. They're kind of like twins. Cousins, long lost cousins, whatever of each other.
For
sure. And so I of course didn't realize at the time, that the leads probably weren't the best quality, but compared to what I was used to dealing with, I'm like, these are freaking awesome. These people actually asked to talk to me in some way. I don't care if it was 6 years ago.
Right.
At one point, they wanted to talk to me.
Right.
And so, I think it just kind of speaks to like mentality with leads, like someone's mentality with leads and their attitude towards them, the outlook towards them really can make a big difference in and their sales ability too, right? Like you have to be able to sell. If one of the best things you can do if you're trying to sell, insurance with leads and sell insurance over the phone is really just shape out your sales ability. Take trainings, like learn from great salespeople, read books. Like that's all the stuff I did. And I also wasn't afraid to make, tens of thousands of sales calls and get punched in the face a lot.
Yeah. I want to, and we've already kind of have plans in the works to spend a lot more time on mindset, but I think there's a lot to be said about mindset. And I honestly think potentially mindset trumps even sales ability. I think the person who is more mentally tough, even if they're a worse salesperson, if they can handle that sort of rejection, they're going to make more money and they're going to make more sales than the person who is potentially an even better salesperson. So I think that's a topic we'll cover another day, you guys. But
yes,
one of my, I'm pointing at Dr. Oz here, but one thing I'll mention as we kind of start to wrap up this FCC topic is, yes, we're getting a brand new administration here in the next few weeks. That's going to include someone new at the FCC. Could these rules change again? Yes, it's possible. I'm not operating under the sense that we're going to see a radical change again. I'm not operating under the idea that we're going to see a full reversal. Is that possible? Maybe it is, but most likely we'll at least not see a continual progression of additional regulation, right? My hope is that we'll just kind of see, at least at a minimum, it'll be parked where it's at. And this doesn't mean you can't work with lead companies. It doesn't mean that you can't hire someone else to help you with marketing. So that's the good news. I think the part that scared a lot of people, and a lot of big companies got scared when they thought that it was the end of being able to work with a marketer. But the reality is, it's just about making sure you have that proof of permission to contact. Make sure you have a copy of the recording. If you're working with someone, they're doing calls for you. If it's a direct mail lead, make sure you have that original direct mail lead. If it's whatever type of marketing you're doing, make sure you have a copy for your records. So if something were to come up, you can pivot back to that and say, look, I do have permission to contact. It's right here. And that's all you really need to worry about with this new FCC rule. You don't need to look at it as a complete killer to marketer. You don't have to go become a next level marketer. You don't have to stop what you're doing and learn something brand new. You just need to make sure that you have that permission to contact.
I love it. We're getting close to the top of the hour on the pod. Was that your final thoughts, or do you have final thoughts? You have additional final thoughts?
I think that I wasn't planning on that being my final thoughts, but I think that really was kind of my final thoughts on this FCC topic. And really both topics, right? Because they go very much so kind of hand in hand. The CMS and FCC, it's a little different, but there's overlap, and just making sure that you adhere to the rules as the best of your ability. I say this all the time. If you're doing what's in best interest of that beneficiary and you're genuinely helping them, that's what you need to worry about the most. Being worried about, well, did the scope of appointment, did it verbally get said perfectly, or, am I saying this perfectly? Don't worry about those details as much as making sure that you're helping that beneficiary. We had this come up in the group the other day. Someone was leaving the country in 24 hours, and they were like, oh, damn, I got to wait 48 hours to help them with their Medicare Advantage app. Oh, well. And it's like, man, what a disservice to that beneficiary. What a disservice that, you could have helped them potentially get coverage before they had to leave the country for a short period of time. But you were under this belief that 48-hour rule needs to be adhered in a way that you might even not be able to help certain beneficiaries. That's not the point of the rule. The point of the rule is to have, yes, they want to make sure that there's a clear understanding of what's going to be discussed, that they have permission from the beneficiary. But in a situation like that, I'm 100% helping that beneficiary. I'll make a note of it too. I'll make a note of it. Oh, you know what? Mr. Jones was jumping a plane to leave the country the next day. So yeah, I actually wrote the app the same day that I talked to him, that the first 24 hours.
My final thoughts is there is no point to that rule. No, guys, I think, understanding the FCC rules is going to be vital, and I hope this episode helps you guys to do that. Understand that at Lead Heroes, we still are able to provide a adapted FCC compliant lead for you. So it's a great resource. You're not going to find probably too many vendors anymore that are going to be able to provide that. And so, yeah, it's a great resource for you. This is the last show of the week for any of you that do watch the pod live on various platforms, on X, on LinkedIn, in the Facebook group, and 7-Figure Medicare Agent. This is our last show of the week. We will not be doing shows on Friday, at least for now. But we will be back on Monday, ready to go with another show. So we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Remember, you can catch the show on a billion different platforms, but I'll just give you a couple. YouTube, Facebook group, LinkedIn, X, iHeartRadio, Sirius XM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, Applecast, I think I said that one already. Amazon Podcasts, Google Cast. I mean, you go and go and go and go and go. I didn't even cover them all. Wherever you're listening to the show, make sure to leave a 5-star review if you're able to do so, and make sure to subscribe and follow. And if you're able to leave comments, leave your feedback, leave a hashtag Team Replay if you're watching on a platform that allows you to do so. And we'll be back next week, you guys, with another episode of the 7 Figures or Bust podcast. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. And hope you guys have a good weekend.
And don't forget, you guys, we're doing Freebie Friday. So we're doing a giveaway every single Friday. I want to make sure to mention this before we end here for the week.
I forgot.
All you have to do is comment on a live stream video, whether it's live or a replay video during the week. So we've got 4 different videos that you guys can comment on, and that will enter you into our raffle of a giveaway that we will be doing tomorrow, end of day Friday. So if you haven't had a chance to look at our previous streams or other shows we've done this week, this is a great time between today and tomorrow to go do that. And then keep an eye in the 7 Figure Medicare Facebook group. We will announce a winner tomorrow by end of day.
Thanks you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys on the next show.
Happy selling.